that roar when you ran out just puts goosebumps on the back of your neck.
Moss went straight through, Andrews there!
He's just forever looking for an opportunity.
Exhilarating football!
That's a good sign of a good team.
Accelerates and punches through them!
And he's only going to get better.
And the hammer stands them up! And Queensland going to do it again!
Well, thanks for joining us for this week's episode of Queenslander, brought to you by the Tab as we count down to the final series. And boys, I just found out this week too, we've got viewers all over the world. I ran into someone at Dolphins training the other day, Shannon Friend, his name was, from New York. He lives with his wife over in New York, but he's expat Queenslander, so he's loving the show. So it's good to see that we've got fans internationally. His sister was actually at training too, a big Broncos fan, so she's not happy.
She's not happy, yeah. Which, that's interesting to know that we're beaming all the way across to New York. So that's good to hear. And Shannon, so Shannon's a Dolphins fan.
Well, yeah, he said he played his junior footy for Redcliffe before he moved over. So yeah, he's loving the Dolphins. So shout out to Shannon, and thanks to everyone else who's watching us internationally or Queensland or wherever you may be. Another person who's not happy at the moment, your old Broncos teammate, Lockie, Gorden Tallis. He's had a whack at Adam Reynolds. He thinks Adam Reynolds should not be the captain anymore of the Broncos moving forward. What have you guys made of this?
I know he mentioned that a few weeks back. Did he say that?
Well, it was on the back more so of the Triple M incident with Billy Walters. So Triple M Mornings was bagging out Kevin Walters and his coaching record. And Billy, who usually comes on the show, declined to come into the show. So Adam Reynolds filled in for that. And Gordy said it was a bad look. It should have been one in, all in. It's a convoluted story, I know.
Yeah. Oh, look, everyone's entitled to their opinion. And I think when the Broncos, after such a strong season last year, when they're not performing, a lot of people get asked about their opinions on the Broncos. And so everyone's entitled to that. Look, I know that everyone from the board down, coaches, staff, players, obviously disappointed with how 2024's gone. But I've always sort of approached it, what's done's done, but you need to learn from it and try and prevent it from happening again. And I think that's the process or the plan that will happen now once the season's over, which will be next week. Go through and understand why it was, wasn't a success like we thought it would be, and then how do we put measures in place to prevent it from happening again.
Exactly, that's right, Lockie. Just try and repair it. All the criticism in the world isn't going to fix it overnight. Gordy's he speaks his mind. He doesn't hold back too much. But it's been a tough year for Adam. He's had a pile of injuries along the way. Let's just hope that he gets to be able to celebrate a better year should he get the opportunity next year. It's all the criticism in the world. I often say that it isn't going to fix things too quickly. Perhaps it'll inspire Adam if he's there. So, yeah.
Do you have him as a skipper next year, or do you look at making someone else captain, given it's Reynolds last year, that he can focus being on halfback?
Oh, no, I think he's capable of doing both.
Yeah, okay.
He's, when the team's playing well and he's playing well, he's the most influential player out there, I thought when he came back after his long layoff with the bicep injury in Newcastle, he put on a clinic.
Yeah.
But it just hasn't been able to maintain that. But I would say that the form of every individual in the team has struggled, and that's just an outcome from a team that's lost confidence, lost form, and obviously, that's the performances we've been getting from every individual, which collectively gives you the outcome that we've been getting. And like I said, it's disappointing, but it's done now. It's now, what do we do about it next year?
And how do you manage shifting leadership from the more senior guys to the younger guys? How do you go about doing that? When you took over as Broncos captain, how old would have you been?
It was probably a bit earlier than I thought because Gordy got injured.
He did his neck.
Yeah. So
2005.
Look, I think it's time, right? So the younger guys just watch the senior players, the older guys learn off them, the older guys give them, a bit of guidance along the way. So it just takes time. And I'm sure, when Adam has retired and left the Broncos, that guys like Paddy Carrigan, Payne Haas, those guys have been sitting in the wings for long enough that they'll know what leadership looks like.
Yeah, they do, Lockie, you're right there. The learning curve is always, studied by a lot of the younger players. They get to understand and learn what it's all about earlier in their career. There might be, and I often think there's a number of players that are born leaders. They're studying under the more experienced players, and there's great players to learn under. So hopefully it'll be all the best for them in the future. Certainly they're going to be able to display their finest form after learning from guys like Adam.
And Gordy's been a staunch supporter of Kevin Walters, kind of protecting him from the criticism. Does Kevy get too much protection from the old boys? I guess it's hard for you guys to answer because you are old boys.
Oh, look, I think whether it's the old boys, look, the Broncos are the Broncos, and the media will make up for it. So, we're a big club, especially when you come off last year's performance and the expectation that was this year on us. If we no one would have thought we wouldn't have made the 8, right? So you just got to cop it. We've been disappointing, we haven't performed, and the criticism that's going to come our way, well, we're just going to have to cop it on the chin and, as I said, use that as motivation for next year. Use it as a point to prove people wrong. The other thing that I need to know, it's not necessarily an excuse, but probably the only player other than Adam Reynolds, probably the first time they've gone into a season where they were probably one of the favourites to win the competition.
Yeah.
And I just don't think they've handled that well. That's my sort of view as working as in the Channel 9 commentary team. They just haven't been able to handle that expectation that they generally haven't had on them in the last, probably 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, and I don't think Adam expected to have a year so affected by injury as well. There was a number of times, and I think it was quite obvious that he was trying to get back onto the field perhaps earlier than expected and earlier than given their thought of approval by the doctors and medical staff. So it's been a tough year. It hasn't been fun, and I'm sure the players have tried their best. And often you get to be able to be affected by the learning curve. And let's hope that it will be a benefit for Brisbane next year. What they learnt in the tough times could be of real benefit for them.
And what you mentioned too, Lockie, playing with pressure, that was perfectly exemplified that Dolphins game. So they had to handle pressure, they handle expectation. They didn't, they couldn't.
There's been a few games like that in the last sort of couple of months, the Bulldogs, the Titans. Again...
Is it just experience?
That's experience, right? So they would have learned, some of these players, particularly the young ones, that the expectation they've had on them this year, they would have learnt a fair bit about how to manage that.
Yeah.
Obviously hasn't managed it well this year, but I'm sure through the end of the season, which I know we're going to talk about a review, which we'll get to, but that'll be what it's all about. Okay, well, let's be honest here and put everything on the table and work out how we do things better next year.
And Lockie, I think it's one of the features throughout the course of the year and a difficult season that you learn plenty of things throughout the course of the season, and I'm sure Kevy would have seen that there were players that have got that leadership about them, and in the tough times they were the ones that were performing. So there can be benefits from it. It's definitely no fun when you're doing it tough, and when you're the captain of the side, you tend to feel that responsibility a little bit more than the others. But you have your interactions with the coaches a lot more often. So it'll be interesting to see how quickly they react and who are the ones that display the best leadership.
Well, you learn more in life in adversity. It's the same in sport,
Yeah.
right? But it's what you do with those learnings. That's the real test for the Broncos.
You touched on before, talk of a review. A lot of clubs toss that word out to appease fans. How do you get positive outcomes out of a review?
Well, you just every individual that gets asked questions, whether it be staff, players, coaches, assistant coaches, you just need to be brutally honest.
Yeah.
And I think a review is often not done. It's done, asking questions of individuals, and all you got to do is encourage them to be brutally honest about their thoughts, and then put it all on the table, and then work out how you approach fixing those, those, I wouldn't say cultural issues, but how you fix those problems that people feel are important to the organisation.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head, Lockie. Honesty. That's the main word. Honesty's got to be there, and it's got to be there's got to be the old admission of guilt, and there's also got to be a responsibility from the coaching staff as well, that they come forward with their thoughts. So it can be repaired in the best way possible, but to do so, there's got to be that famous word of teamwork come back into it, and if the responsibility is there and it's not dodged, then there will be a benefit.
If you were in charge of the review, what would you change at the Broncos? What needs to be fixed to get them back to the finals next year?
Mate, I thought the dominance that was on display from the boys up front wasn't there. They did not have a good year injury-wise.
Yeah.
They had a couple of their key players that weren't available on a number of occasions, and for those that are seen as the key players, when they're not responsible, that's the time where you're looking for your other players to display plenty of class and ability on the field, where they have that a little bit of added responsibility when it's on show.
What about for you, Lockie? What would you change? Walt touched on it there. Like, to me, they need a forward enforcer. Like, Haas and Carrigan are excellent. They're so reliable. But even the other night, Tavita Pangai played them off the break. He got in their face, he rattled them, and then it was looking around like, who's going to do that for the Broncos?
Yeah. Well, we got, I guess, again, this is not excuses, but losing Tom Flegler, who the Dolphins, didn't get anything out of him either, but that sort of 1-2 punch we had, with Haas and Flegler, that's taking nothing away from Corey Jensen. He's been a great player. But what happens when a team is struggling for form is that everyone looks like they're down on their, on what they're capable of, and that's how it's looked all year. So, look, they'll given that they'll finish the season early this year instead of going to a grand final, which we obviously would rather be there, they'll get a longer break, they'll get a longer pre-season, and it'll just come down to how hard they want to work in that period of time, because that's sometimes a lot of coaches talk about premierships are won in October, November the year before, because that's where the work needs to be done to get themselves fit, get themselves ready, get themselves mentally tough for the season ahead. So I don't think it's about trying to find new players. I just think it's about trying to find more effort in the individual players that are there right now.
And plenty of effort starts up front. I remember in the old days when Shane Webke used to, if things weren't going all that well throughout the course of the team, he'd take the responsibility. Andrew G, the same, just cart the ball up, try and smash their way for the opposition. And I know we've got a couple of players there that had enormous responsibility and always performed quite well. But there is that opportunity for when you see others do it, it's pretty easy to feel the responsibility of taking the job on yourself.
Yeah, and I guess the shortened pre-season had an adverse effect because they went better than they did last year. So obviously they get to the grand final. That shortens your pre-season, and then they go and play in Vegas. So you look at the other teams who played in Vegas, didn't go deep into the final. So the teams who made the prelim last year were the Broncos, the Storm, the Warriors and the Panthers. Broncos were the only ones who went to Vegas. The other teams, some of them made the finals. So you almost go 3 weeks longer in your season, and then Vegas shortens it by 2 weeks. So you had 5 weeks less of pre-season training. Does that take a toll now?
I think it takes a toll. You know, like I don't like sort of using the word excuse, but there's a lot of reasons that maybe contributed to the performance of the team this year. But what is in front of them now is they're going to have the best opportunity to get themselves fully ready for next year. There is an international tournament coming up, but as a club perspective, from a coaching, there's 2 new assistant coaches coming in. Everything's set. Got plenty of runway for time and effort and mental toughness to be sort of placed into the group over the next 2 to 3 months. So they should have themselves primed for a good start to 2025.
And they'll end the season on Thursday night. You can catch that game live and free on Nine's Wide World of Sports. The Melbourne Storm up against the Broncos. Potentially could be the farewell game for Corey Oates. Might be his last ever game for the Broncos. So, with that in mind, you guys, what have you liked seeing about Oates? He's been quite a character. He's up and down throughout his career, but he's been a fun player to watch, and he's turned into quite a significant fan favourite.
Yeah, we've got to remember there was a bit of an issue on making the call on what position he was going to play early in his career. There was you got to play him in the second row. He's not that quick. You can't get him out there. Then he was shuffled out to the wing. I think he might have played fullback one game, and then he came in back to the forwards. But the good part about it was that wherever he played, he put in a good performance. Did quite well. But if there's a good problem to have as a player, I think that's it. One where you don't really know where your best position is, but you're being selected in the team because you're playing well.
Yeah.
For me, he's sort of one of the pioneers of the leaving the ground and placing the ball in the corner.
Yeah.
He sort of, I just always picture him running. Doesn't really step much. Just strides out and goes for the corner. And I think there's a stat there in 22, which is only 2 years ago, he scored 20 tries.
Yeah, his most ever.
Yeah, and he keeps reminding me that he's coming for me. You've
got one more try than him.
I've got 122, so it'd be fitting if the big fella can get at least 1 or 2 this week, But you know what, if he gets 2, I'd probably never hear the end of it. If he gets 1, maybe we can sort of share the accolade.
Yeah, it was very well liked by the fans as well. They enjoyed having him there.
Yeah, it'd be quite fitting if you got a try. Come on, Melbourne Storm. You've already got the minor premiership. Let Corey Oates score a try so he can join Lockie as the second equal leading try scorer in Broncos history. Steve Renouf still well and truly above everyone else. One team that is going to play in the finals for Queensland, the Cowboys, coming off a narrow win over an understrength Storm. Apologies to last week. I said Kyle Felt and Jake Granville are the only remaining players from that 2015 grand final. I forgot about Jason Taumalolo because he's been injured with that fractured cheekbone. So, remiss of me not to mention Jason Taumalolo is still kicking around. But that game against the Storm, that was a weird one, Wal. It was a potential danger game, but they just get away with the victory. Yeah,
they did. I think it would have pleased the coach. But they've been a side that's been very good performers. You bring up the name of Taumalolo, and I'm sure that you're going to say that I've made you sick over the years, the pronunciation of his name and the use of his name. Watching him play when he was at his best, what a performer he was. He was unbelievable, and there's been a little bit of controversy in the alteration of his playing position now. I must say, and I'm not being critical of the coach, but it has been a little bit of a surprise to me to see him playing in the front row. To me, he was probably as destructive as any player that I've seen playing the game when he made the change to playing in the front row. He's just a wonderful player. The coach obviously had plans to use him short term, and there's no problem with that. The coach is the man in charge, but he has been a guy that's been quite remarkable, and I do recall some of the performances he put in at international level playing against the Kangaroos, which absolutely astounded me. He's as powerful a runner as I've ever seen in the game.
And Lockie, for the Cowboys to make a dent in the finals, What do they need to do? I think defensively they need to be better because they always get into the mindset of like, it doesn't matter if someone scores 30, we can score 32. Yeah. That's not going to happen in the finals.
And that's what happened the other night, right? So Storm had rested how many? 10?
Yeah, 11? 10, 11,
so the human nature mindset would be to just have a little bit of a relax.
Yeah.
You know, but it's the Storm. They were always going to come ready to play. But the Cowboys, for me, are a bit like some of the other teams in that bottom four, maybe not the Bulldogs, but if they don't get their defence right, then you just can't beat these other top teams because they've got their defence in order, and that's what wins premierships. So for mine, the only time the Cowboys look like they're going to beat the better teams is when they're ruthless in their defence.
And they've got a huge game this weekend. I think they game Saturday night against the Bulldogs. So that's 5th versus 6th. If the Cowboys win that, they secure a home final. If they lose, they'll probably have an away final. So how important is that? To me, their whole season hinges on that. If they're at home week 1 of the finals, that's a massive advantage.
Well, I don't know. Like I think the teams that could swap over is Manly and
Manly needs to beat Cronulla.
So would the final be at 4 Pines?
Yeah, in the first week they're allowed to have it. So you don't want to be going there.
You don't want to be going there, right? So it's a big. I mean, and they're playing a team who I think's a chance of winning the whole thing, the Bulldogs.
Yeah, okay,
I know they beat by Manly last week, but. That's a big game for the Cowboys, and I actually think that's a real test of semi-final football. So if they want to get their game ready for finals, then this is the game to try and do it.
Well, I'm truly.
Interesting though, Adam, I was going to say that they appear to or seem to have had or be dealing with the one issue, the halves combination, who they're having there, who they're playing at halfback. Yeah. There appears to be a little bit of argument on, the man that will take the job in the most important games, and I think that's something that has proven to be a little bit of a drama for them. But they certainly do have a group of players that are quite capable of producing their best. Can they do it at the highest level? Well, we're about to see.
Yeah, interesting times ahead for the Cowboys. And let's move on to our Tab Eras debate here this week. So the guys on 100% footy on Wide World Sports, they're debating that this is the greatest crop of playmakers of all time. Agree or disagree? It's a tough question. What do you guys think on that statement? I don't know if Joey's included himself in that.
Well, I mean, it wasn't that long ago we were talking about sort of our best halves are our experienced halves. So, and there's probably a chance a few of those will leave the game soon. So this might be a bit of an
overlap period.
Yeah, this might be a period where we do have, our best playmakers out there. But I reckon in the next 2 or 3 years that's going to change significantly. I mean it's. Some of the halves we've got in our game, and they're all very similar. In the 7, on the ball, controlling, managing the game, and the 6 is the bit of a play off the cuff, X factor type player, and that seems to be the model that most clubs use, and that's probably why we're getting a combination of game management and some sort of ad-lib play that. Fans love to watch.
Yeah, you're right. You're dead right, Lockie. And, when people are dominant in certain positions, there are defensive strategies put in place to make sure that they aren't the players that are any longer totally controlling the game, and they will have an opportunity to shift where their attacking raids start. So it's, I know we can sort of move it around, but we're kind of just getting into a situation where, we play the best possible football that we can, using those key people in playmaking positions until they're grabbed by the throat by the opposition. As soon as that happens, the coach works pretty well, and I know that Bennett, did it for years at the Broncos. There was a time where Alf was basically, grabbed and stopped, and where did it go then? Well, one position wider. Kevy and Lockie tended to take over from Alf, and then he was a little bit of a support player for a while that proved he was just as good as that. And it was the Red Offs and everyone else that that were the pains for the opposition defence. It's an easy one to come up with, I guess, but coming up with an answer to it is very difficult.
And just on that, how do you think playing 5'8" this day and age has changed now between when you played? How is the 5'8" role different?
Look, I think it's still pretty much the same, and will be determined by who the halfback is.
Yeah, okay.
There's a lot of times where we see that the halfbacks in some sides are the key playmakers. Others that it'll be the 5'8s, and the halfback is there just to tip the ball on. And a lot of the time, it's also determined, Adam, by the players that they have in the key attacking roles outside them, and that's the fullback and the centres where they add. So we can be spoiled by having enormously talented players in a back line. Halfback and 5'8", I've probably always said that they are the guys that are the controlling body for what happens in the back line.
Yep.
I think sixes in the previous era were about shifting the ball wide to their centres, just seeing space and getting the ball to them. I mean, Wall was different because he was, even though he played six, he was like he was the dominant player, so he got the ball when he wanted it. Yeah. But the sixes, not everyone was the same, but the sixes generally was about shifting the ball to their centres. And remember, it wasn't always centre aside either. It was inside centre, outside centre. So they were basically a link man. But in today's game, a lot of the sixes are runners.
Yeah. I said, Adam, that I was basically spoiled rotten when I was playing, particularly in the interstate games. I had Alf inside. I have a look outside me, and there's Gene Miles and Mal Meninga as the key attacking weapons, and thinking, well, have a look at that. If anybody that's not pleased by having those two, and you could see that the opposition used to say, oh, I'll go in, I'll take Lewis. No, I'm not. I'm going to take Meninga or Miles out here, and trying to make the mind up can often be determined by who it is that is the alteration.
Yeah. You could almost put Wall's name forward for this next question, Lockie. Who do you think a previous era playmaker could still dominate in the current game?
I thought you were going to say the fattest 5'8" in history. I was going to say I'll win that one easily.
Look, I saw this question and I was thinking about it. I mean, 30 years ago there wasn't a lot of... there was focus on defence, but not what it is now, right? So there was always space. But the modern day game... the rules are designed to minimise stoppages, to create fatigue and create space.
Yeah.
So the same players that did well back in that era would be the same guys that would do well in today's game. And without embarrassing Wall, I mean, the other guy I think would be, he dominated very, very well when he was playing, but he'd go well in today's game too. It'd be Brett Kenny.
Yeah.
7 days a week. Yeah. Yeah, when I used to play against Brett, I had the fear that he was going to take me on every time he got the ball, because he could run fast, I couldn't. I had nothing to it, and he had the opportunities, and to try and get rid of his danger in the back line, we used to try and stand the centres a little bit closer in, so he'd look up and spot that there was space out wide. New South Wales at that stage, I think, had Chris Handy. That's Chris Handy. Who am I trying to think of here?
Chris Anderson? Or?
Chris Anderson. Yeah. Chris Anderson playing on the wing, and he was a good try-scoring machine, but he wasn't the quickest player on the field. So it was good to try and entice them to throw the ball wider.
I'd love to see Cliffy Lyons. He'd be scheming around, little forward decoy runs.
Well, he's another guy, you know. But I think, same... Cliffy had great vision, and his passing game was sublime. He was like a magician.
Yeah.
Bert was a runner, but he also had great vision. So Oh, look, there's so many great names, yeah.
They're all great players, and if they weren't, they wouldn't have been playing representative footballers. And, Cliffy, and it depended on, the team that they had around them as well. When Cliffy was at his best, Manly were at their best, and so was the case for Parramatta, New South Wales and Australia with Bert Kenny.
Well, one guy who was coaching back then is still coaching, is Wayne Bennett. He inspired that monumental upset over the Broncos to keep the Dolphins season alive. Lockie, how did he do it? Or how did we not expect him to do it?
Well, look, I think those changes to the team. He did that to get a reaction. Because when you look at what they'd been going through the last sort of 10, 12 weeks, it just felt like they were just slowly falling off the cliff. So he had to do something because otherwise he would have got the same result. He did that and, another masterstroke by the master. He
gets them every time he needs them. If there's a bit of a problem issue that presents itself, if it's in Wayne Bennett's team, in his club, it doesn't last long. It's just a matter of time until he can come up with the answer to it. And he's been the best in the business for a long time, and a lot of people sort of forget, he's been seen as a great coach that reacts in different ways. Well, you've got to be a very smart man to come up and put smart things into operation. And he certainly, can work extremely well. And what he's done for a number of players that he's had under his guidance has been quite remarkable. I've listened to some people be critical of some players saying, we don't think he can play. Well, they get under Bennett's guidance and he can play, they can play, and they all get around to producing the best performances of their lifetime. So to have him as their guidance officer is perhaps the biggest thrill of their career.
I was talking to a few Dolphins players in the aftermath of that Battle of Brisbane. How did he get the best out of you? And they said they came in after the Melbourne Storm game. Bear in mind, they get flogged by the Storm down in Melbourne. They said they didn't do any video review. What they did, Wayne clipped up all the tries that the Broncos had scored against them in the 3 previous battles of Brisbane. So they'd lost all 3 of those games, big hits the Broncos put on tries. So he puts it on the big screen, presses pause once it's finished, gets up and goes, "You blokes going to do anything about that?" and just walks out. And that obviously lit a fire in their belly that burnt down Suncorp Stadium for the Broncos' final hopes.
Well, when you've got 1,000 games experience, you know what works and what doesn't. And look, they got touched up by Melbourne, but what's done's done. You put that behind you. He just shifted the focus straight to the Broncos and found a way to motivate them. And I think having the changes to the lineup was another point of where they reacted.
What about the courage dropping your halfback when the season's on the line? Katoa plays half all season long. Sean O'Sullivan had only started in round 1 in the halves. That's it. That was only his 2nd game of the year playing in the halves.
What about the courage to bring Alan Langer back in 2001? To play Origin 3. I'm sure there's plenty of examples where he's had some courage. But he would have drawn on his experience about how the playing group will respond to those decisions.
And moving forward,
You just like listening to Bennett when he described his first steps and how he got into it, and the Jack Gibson time he went and lived with Jack Gibson just to understand some of the reasons that Jack coached the way that he did. And it just shows that it's not just the players that go to extensive lengths to perfect the skills that they display on the field.
Now, what about this Sunday? Amazing way this draw has turned out. The last game of the regular season will determine who finishes in the top 8. The Knights, the Dolphins. How do you like their chances? I think this is a genuine 50-50 game.
Sellout at Newcastle. So atmosphere, crowd on the back of the home side. Look, for mine, the Dolphins, a bit like the Cowboys. So before they beat the Broncos, they kept the Broncos to 6. Before that, the previous 4 games, the opposition scored 30 points or more. So it's a defence mindset for the Dolphins because Kalen Ponga he's in form. And you give him time and space, you're in for a long day. So I think there's enough points in the Dolphins, but they need to keep the Knights to 2 to 3 tries max.
Yeah, they've got to restrict, and it's got to be their defence. You're right, Lockie. That's on show, and they've got a pretty handy coach as well that will affect some key plays, and he's brought players, and I'm sure one or two of these players could have come back a week earlier, but Bennett wasn't prepared to gamble, and he's brought them back at a perfect time. They seem to have had some difficult times during the year, but they're looking pretty good at the moment, and I'm sure that he's got enormous confidence in the power of his players to put that into effect in a key game.
If they do sneak into the finals, how big of an achievement will it be in the context of his coaching career? I know he's done some amazing stuff, but a lot of people bag the roster of the Dolphins, and to get it in order within 2 years, and also they're nearly $2 million under the salary cap with the current squad they've got.
Oh, it's just another box ticked for Wayne Bennett. You know, so many achievements, and there's been even in the first year, early in the season, everyone's going, wow, the Dolphins were like in the top 4 for a long period of time.
Yep.
Then this year, it looked like they were easily going to play finals, and then it started to get a bit wobbly. So a lot comes down to this weekend, and I think the inaugural coach for the Broncos did a great job. The inaugural coach for the Dolphins, got them away to a great start. So, again, it's just a long list of achievements for Wayne Bennett. It's just another one that you can put on the resume.
As a Broncos fan, do you become a Dolphins fan now? I know it's the arch rival against Redcliffe, but now that the Broncos are out, do you think Broncos fans will have a soft spot and go, maybe I'd like to see the Dolphins stick it to some Sydney teams?
I don't know about that.
Or default to my Cowboys, is that a more favourable option? You got to support someone in the finals.
Yeah, but, I think the closer you are to a team, the more rival there is, It's a bit like Roosters fans cheering for South, in the finals, just because they live down the road.
That way.
So, I think, for Wayne, it's probably a nice touch that he can get him to the finals. But I don't think there'll be too many Broncos fans out there
cheering for the Dolphins.
But in saying that, there's a lot of Dolphins fans that were Broncos fans.
Yeah.
So they just were waiting for their team to come into the NRL, and they've moved their allegiances over. I think this will be a cracking game. Yeah,
and as Lockie said, it was the timing of the return of the players as well that played a key part in their positioning at the moment. And Bennett's been very game on a number of occasions where he probably could have pulled or gone into panic mode had he been another coach and said, we're in trouble now, I need to win this game. So although these two guys are injured, I've got to play them. Bennett doesn't do that. If he knows that they're struggling and they're in a position where if they play, we might win, but if they play, we also may lose them for 6 to 8, maybe 10 weeks, and it may be ruled out for the rest of the season. So the experience, the long-range experience that he's had has taught him plenty of lessons that have been enormously beneficial for his clubs.
Yeah, I hope the Dolphins get it. I think it's better for the NRL if the Dolphins are the team that sneaks in, but you'll see that game live and free Sunday afternoon, the Knights against the Dolphins. But this round kicks off Suncorp Stadium. Broncos, can they finish on a high against the Melbourne Storm? Thanks for joining us on Queenslander. We'll be back next week.
You win some, you lose more. For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website.
This year, NRL on 9 is your one-stop shop for all footy.
That's right, Freddie. Not about the highlights, action, 7 days a week.
Billy and Gus podcast, get that on your drive on the way home. Immortal Behaviour, grab a seat on the couch for that. And of course, my favourite, Freddie in the 8.
The best footy brains, the biggest games.
Don't trust the algorithm, subscribe to NRL on 9 and get all your entertainment there.